Hey everyone. I want to make sure everyone can hear us. Hey guys, if you can hear us, can you write down in the chat? Yay, awesome, cool. Hi everyone, welcome to our episode number 6 for CS101. We're just going to take a few minutes and then we're going to jump in. How's everyone's Tuesday going? Actually, write down in the chat where you guys are from. Ooh, California, nice. India, whoa.
Madison, Wisconsin, cool.
Wow, you guys are from all over. That's awesome. You guys are from all over. That's awesome. Oh, I just heard myself. All right, Ben, how do you feel? Are you ready to get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, cool.
I'm not seeing myself in the video though.
Let's see. What if you share your screen?
Maybe. Yeah, let's try that. Hello, hello, everybody. My name's Ben. Can y'all hear me? Someone says, nice chair. All right, y'all, we're gonna get started with the lesson today. Thanks for that, Mark. We're gonna get started today with our lesson on strings. If you're following along with us, here's the link that we're gonna be using. I'll share that in the chat as well, in case anybody's missing it, but you can also find it in the link for the YouTube video. Sorry, I guess I can't add it to the chat, but you can find the link in the description below. We're going to be talking about CS101 strings in Python today. And for the most part, you can see that this lesson is broken into 2 lessons: introduction to strings in general, string methods as well. And then at the end, there's a string code challenge. We found that that going over those code challenges is actually super helpful. So we're going to be focusing today on that code challenge down here. But before we do that, we're going to do a brief introduction to strings. So we're going to go through a couple of these components here and this cheat sheet. So I think just to start, Galina, I think it'd probably be good if we went into the introduction first, just did a brief intro to strings and then went through the cheat sheet before going into the code challenge. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Introduction to Strings here, and we'll jump into this first lesson. And oh, I am all the way through here. Let me go back to the beginning, and let me do some stuff here. All right, so here I am on the introduction, and I'm going to give you all a couple seconds to get set up. So go ahead and open up this introduction page. And while you're at it, feel free to share in the chat whether or not you've used Python before, and whether or not you've been to one of these live streams before. If this is your first live stream, let us know. this is your first time using Python, let us know. Or if you know any other languages, that'll be cool to know too. And I've got that dual monitor set up here, so that's why I'm not looking directly at the camera. I'll go ahead and get started in another 30 seconds, give you all some time to get set up.
Yeah, also feel free to write in the chat if you're ready to go. Just post like a thumbs up, or if you need a few more minutes, also let us know.
All right, my computer is working hard. Let me quickly close some things here. And get started. Oh boy. All right, let's get into it then. So today we're going to be talking about strings, and specifically strings in Python. Most programming languages, or if not all of them, have strings. And strings are how we represent the words and sentences in our programs, right? So, all languages, how we communicate with each other includes words and sentences. And so it makes sense that we can put words and sentences into our programs as well. And we do all of this with a string. Now here we can see that a string is a sequence of characters contained within a pair of either single quotes or double quotes. And it doesn't matter which one you use, both are treated the same. You just want to make sure that that these two quotes match each other. A string can be any length. It can have one character in it. It can have 1,000 characters in it. And it can contain any letters, numbers, symbols, or spaces. So in this lesson, if you go through this lesson, you'll learn a ton of different things about Python strings, like how to slice them and what that means, how to pull out specific characters, search for strings inside other strings, iterate through strings, and use strings in conditional statements. As I mentioned in this live stream, we're just going to do a brief intro, and then we're going to go through those code challenges in the end. So let's just go through this very first lesson together, or this very first exercise together to see how we make a string. So the first instruction here says, save your favorite word as a string to the variable favorite word. So I'm going to go up here, and I have this variable here, and I'm going to save in that variable a string of my favorite word. If you want, you can share your favorite word in the chat, but I'm going to type in platypus. I think platypuses are cool. And I'm going to go ahead and actually put that in the chat so y'all can see what I typed in here. And if you want to, you can actually share your favorite word and the string in the chat as well, so we can see that you're typing it in with the right syntax. That's my favorite word. And we'll run, and we can pass that first test and then print it to the console. Print favorite word. And we can see what that looks like inside the console. Now, if you're new to Python, if you've never used it before, in Python, we give our variables names that are separated with an underscore. And we use the print command, the print function, to display values to this output panel over here. Did I spell that wrong? Platypus? Yeah, I'm not an English person. There we go. I'm a programmer, right? I'm not an English major. And that's the basics of strings. Let's go through a couple more of these, and then we'll go into the cheat sheet. So let's continue on to the next one, and I may have to reset a bunch of these. How are we doing on time, Galena? Should I pause for some questions, or what do you think?
I think you're doing great so far. If any questions come up in the chat, I'll make sure to answer them, but you're good.
Also, just a fair warning, this is the first time that I've done this, so appreciate any patience you have. So let's continue on to the second one. Are strings also spaces and symbols? Yeah, so we're actually going to come up on that in a couple examples, but yeah, you can definitely have strings like hello space world exclamation point. This is also a string that counts. So let's go through this second part here. This is a really important concept of strings, which is that strings can be thought of as a list of characters, which y'all learned in a previous lesson. Like any other list, each character in a string has an index. And so if we were to look at this string here, blueberry, which is stored in the variable favorite fruit, then we can access an individual character from that string using the index. So if we want to look at the first letter of the string, we could write something like this. So let me actually pull this code into my script here. And so I can test it out as we can see it in here. So favorite fruit is blueberry. And here I'm going to print it out there. So here when I print out favorite fruit 1, we see the value L, the letter L, that character. Now you may be thinking, okay, why am I seeing the letter L and not the letter B? Well, remember that lists start with the index 0, not 1. So if I were to change this number 1 here to a 0 and run it again, then we would get that first character B in our output panel. Now, one key component to remember about these indexes is that they have to be a whole number. So if I were to do something like this, 1.5, which is not a whole number, then we would get a type error. That says string indices must be integers. So make sure that your indices are whole numbers starting at 0. And then we can move along to these instructions here. One of the most common things that are represented by strings are names. Save your name as a string to the variable my name. So it looks like we need to create some of this stuff down here. So I'm just going to leave my code up here. This is fine to stay. I'm just going to go ahead and add a my name variable and set it to a string of my name. And this time I'm going to use single quotes just to mix it up. Notice that I'm using single quotes on both ends, making sure that they're the same. If I were to do something like that, that would also give me an error, which we can see here. Just get this syntax error here. So we've got to make sure that both of those are the same. Use single quotes on both sides. We have my name is Ben, passing that first test, and then select the first letter of the variable my name and save it to first initial. So here again, I'm going to create a variable called first initial. And that's going to be the first letter of my name. So I want to grab that letter B there. And as we saw in this prior example, we can just type out the name of the variable, so my name, and then use brackets. And then the index 0 is going to be that first character. So first initial equals my name, bracket 0. Let's test that out, and we're good to go. Now, if you want, you can also test out your code just to make sure that it's working by printing out that first initial variable. We already know that it's working because it's passing the test. But if you want to see what that first initial value is, you can add that print command there, and you can see that first initial there. Now, again, we're seeing two B's. The first B is the first initial of the word blueberry, of my favorite fruit. And the second one is the first initial of my name. Now let's see what we have coming up. Let's go into slicing maybe, and then we'll go into the cheat sheet, Galena, and then you can take over for the challenges. So I'll pause here for a couple more seconds, and then I'll continue on to the next one here. Again, the main component that we're focusing on in this lesson, or in this exercise rather, is that we can use these brackets, it's called bracket notation, to access a specific index, which is like the location of a character within this string. So my name is Ben, and that first index, B right there, is index 0. All right, let's go on to the third lesson in this, or the third exercise in this lesson. Cut me a slice of a string. This is one of the coolest parts about strings in Python. And let me reset all this stuff here. So here you should just see first name, Rodrigo, last name, Villanueva. Now, one of the coolest things about strings in Python is that we can grab what's called a slice of the string. A slice is, it's sort of like a piece of the string, but it's a new string that we can sort of extract out of this existing string. And we do so using this syntax here. So let's look at an example of this first. I'm going to just pull this code into my editor here. So I have my favorite fruit again, blueberry, and we're printing it out. Just go ahead and run that so we can see blueberry printed out into the console. Now, every time I run, it's going to be trying to execute these tests down here, which I haven't even paid attention to yet. So they're failing. So that's why I'm ignoring those failing tests for now. We're just going to go through this, and then we'll go down to the instructions. Now, if we want to pull out a slice, let's say that we want to get a new string that contains just eBear. So these characters right here, eBear. Well, I could pull out that slice of this string, favorite fruit, by writing something like this: favorite fruit, and then in brackets, 3:8. Let's go ahead and copy that into our editor here and run. And there, again, you see eBear. Now, how did that work? How was I able to do that? Well, let's take a closer look at this syntax here. Which you can see sort of outlined at the very top. So we have our string name, which is favorite fruit. And then we have the first index colon last index. Well, that first index 3, if we look down at our diagram here, that first index 3 shows the letter E, the character E in our string blueberry. And index 8 is in between R and Y. When we write this syntax, we're slicing a range of characters from our favorite fruit that starts with index 3, so it starts here, and includes index 3, and goes up to index 8, but excludes everything after index 8. So it's going to be everything between and including index 3, and before but not including index 8. So we get eBear. Yeah, and I see some folks of y'all are saying, like, I don't think this is live. I think there's like a little bit of a time delay between when I see the chat, or at least when you see the video, and what I'm saying. So I may not see your questions immediately, but the folks who are following along in the chat, they're going to be answering a lot of your questions in the chat. Now, one other cool component of slicing, so not only can we say, I want all the characters between index 3 and index 8, but I can also have what are called open-ended slices. So yeah, let me zoom in here. I'm noticing some folks are asking for a little more screen real estate. There we go. So I was just saying that we can have what are called open-ended slices, and they look like this. So let me copy in this one first. Print favorite fruit colon 4. And then I'll do print 4 colon. So these are called open-ended slices because we're not specifying the starting index or the ending index in these. And when you leave out either the starting or ending index, Python is just going to assume that you want everything from the beginning of the string up until index 4. And when you leave out the ending index, it's going to assume that you want everything from index 4 all the way to the end. So here we're getting everything before index 4, which is blue. And here we're getting everything from index 4 on, which is berry. Now let's go on to our instructions. We're going to go through these. I'm going to get rid of a bunch of this, all of this text up here. You're a programmer working for Copeland's corporate company. At this company, each employee's username is generated by taking the first 5 letters of their last name. So it looks like for Rodrigo Villanueva, it's going to be Villa. A new employee, Rodrigo Villanueva, is starting today, and you need to create his account. His first name and last name are stored here. And we need to create a variable called new account by slicing the first 5 letters of his last name. So we'll say new account. And we want the first 5 letters of his last name. So last name. And there are actually a couple ways of doing this. I'm going to write one of them out. And I'm going to give y'all a chance maybe to see if you can type in the other way. So new account equals last name. And I think maybe the most explicit way of writing this, I want every character starting from the first character, which is index 0. And I want the first 5 characters. So that's going to go up to 0. This is 0. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. And I want everything before index 5 here. Now, an easy way to actually figure out how many characters you have is to take this number and subtract this number. So 5 minus 0 gives us 5 characters. That's how I know that new account is going to have 5 characters in it. Now I see that Vinit is giving us the other approach to doing this, which is really awesome. We could also write this by saying new account equals last name, and then using that open-ended slice method that we saw earlier. Because I'm leaving out that first index, Python's assuming that this number here is going to be a 0. And this is going to give me everything from the beginning up until index 5. Now here it says temporary passwords for new employees are also generated from their last names. Create a variable called temp password. By creating a slice out of the 3rd through 6th letters of last name, your string should have a total of 4 characters. So I need to slice last name, and I need 4 characters between 3rd and 6th indexes. Or sorry, the 3rd and the 6th letters. So if I go in here, I'm looking at 3, 4, 5, and 6. I want those 4 letters right there. Now, before I finish this up, I'll give you all a chance to type this in and submit your thoughts on how you might do this. I saw Vinit put in 3:6 and then retracted it, which is kind of interesting. This is a really common way that you might make a mistake here. You might think, OK, 3 is the first character I want, and 6 is the last character I want. So let's put in 3 and 6. But remember, this is the first character that we're not going to include. So we would want to write 3:7, right? And again, we can check the math here by subtracting 3 from 7. We know that there's 4 characters here. Now, if I run this, we're actually going to fail the test. Now, why did we fail? Well, let's print out temp password to see what we got. And we might understand a little bit better why we were wrong. So remember, we wanted LLAN, but we got LANU. Nice. I'm seeing a couple of folks here, Nikila and Ofire Cyberpunk, given the correct answer. Remember, indexes start at 0. So the 3rd character is actually index 2. And so then this ending index is going to be index 6, right? Because we want index 2, 3, 4, and 5, and pause right before 6. Let's run that, and there we get LLAN. And for now, I think we're going to pause with going through these exercises. This gives us a good place to start, at least, with strings. And I want to bring our attention to the cheat sheet, which we're going to be using while we go through the challenges with Galena. So I'm gonna leave this page here. Maybe I'll give you all 10 more seconds to look over it. And then we're going to go back into the curriculum, into the course syllabus, and look at the cheat sheet for a second. Let me go back here. Actually, maybe it's linked down here somewhere.
Yeah.
Aha. If you scroll to the bottom of your instructions pane on the left, you'll see this section that says concept review. And we can take a look at the materials cheat sheet. So let's go ahead and do that. Cheat sheet, sorry. Yeah, there's no she here. The cheat sheet. Sorry about that. Maybe I mumbled too much. All of these lessons, as you can see, have a cheat sheet for them. We're looking at the strings one, and you can access all of the other ones like loops and lists here. I'm not going to go into all of this, but we're going to refer back to it as Galena goes through the challenges. But here you can find a lot of really important information about strings if you need a quick refresher. And we're going to touch upon a lot of this stuff as we go through these challenges. Here's some of those things that we just talked about, indexing and slicing. Some things that you may be familiar with from your lessons on lists and looping is iterating. So we can do that with strings as well. You may also be familiar with the len function, which I believe you can use on lists as well, but you can do that with strings to know how many characters are in a string. We can concatenate, which just means combine 2 strings to form a new string. So here we can add 1 fish and 2 fish to create the new string 1 fish, 2 fish. And a bunch of other things called Python methods, which again, I'm not going to go into, but they allow you to do some really awesome things with strings. Like title, turn this string Dark Knight into title case, where each character is capitalized. And yeah, I think this is a good place to stop. Galena, do you want to take over and go through those challenges?
Yeah, sounds good. Can you just show me what the exercise was that you stopped on? Was it 4?
We stopped at exercise 3. Cut me a slice of string.
Awesome, cool. So I'll jump to that one and share my screen. Okay. Let me know if you guys can see my screen. Share my Ben, can I get a thumbs up if I'm sharing? Awesome. Cool.
Let's see. I'm not seeing it yet on YouTube, but I see it on ours. Yep, you're good.
Yeah, I think there's just a slight delay. Okay, cool. So we'll just jump into the next exercise, which is concatenating strings. So you can also concatenate 2 existing strings together into a new string. This is something Ben mentioned briefly as he was running through the cheat sheet. So if you have 2 strings, one is fruit prefix with blue, and one is fruit suffix with berries, we can actually use the plus operator to combine these 2 strings. So notice how we created a new variable called favorite fruit by combining fruit prefix and fruit suffix. So using a print statement, we would output favorite fruit and it should return blueberries. So I'm just gonna jump into the code editor and go through this to show you how it looks. Awesome. So now we see blueberries on the right. So something interesting about concatenation is that if you want to add a space, you have to specify that. So notice that there are no spaces added here. We don't have a space between blue and berries. It is a single word. So to manually add in the spaces when concatenating strings, we have to specify that. So let's take a look at this fruit sentence. So fruit sentence equals my favorite fruit is plus favorite fruit. So if I run this, can anyone tell me what I should see as the output? So for anyone who said that there isn't going to be a space in the sentence between is and blueberries is correct, because we didn't specify a space after is. So if you take a look at the next example in that same code snippet, there is a space right before the double quote. So let's go ahead into our code editor and add that space. And now clicking run should show me a sentence with the appropriate spacing. So here is that space between is and blueberries. Right, now let's try out this exercise. So Copeland's corporate company has realized that their policy of using the first 5 letters of an employee's last name as a username isn't ideal when they have multiple employees with the same last name. That makes sense. So write a function called account generator that takes 2 inputs, first name and last name, and concatenates the first 3 letters of each and then returns the new account name. All right, that was a lot. So let's try to break it into digestible chunks. So first thing we want to do is we want to write a function. So let's recall how we write functions. This is something that we covered in the previous live streams. So a function in Python is defined with using the def keyword followed by its name. And in this case, it also takes 2 inputs, first name and last name. So can anyone tell me what these 2 elements in the parentheses are called? Ben, can you just let me know if anyone writes it in the chat?
Will do. Yep, we got a couple folks saying parameters or attributes, but Frankie's got it right.
Okay, awesome. Yes, so they are parameters. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these 2 parameters and concatenate the first 3 letters of each and then return the account name. So something that we're going to use is a syntax from the previous exercise, which is where we used the colon within the subscript syntax. So to grab the first 3 letters of each, we can actually use :3, right? Because that's going to grab the first 3 letters. So what I want to do is I want to use this syntax for both the first name and the last name parameters. So we want to make sure we return this. So we'll use the return keyword, first name. And now because we're concatenating, we're going to use the plus operator. So last name and also :3. Now let's hit run. Check out for me. Try that again. Awesome. So that should have checked off for you. Now, if you also want to test your function, we can do so on the following line. We're going to use first name and last name provided in script.py, which is just the name of our file, and save it to the variable new account. So I'm going to create a new variable, new account, and I'm going to set it equal to my function call. So remember that in order for us to activate or bring a function to action, we have to type out its name and pass in any arguments for the parameters. So in this case, our parameters are first name and last name, and we want to pass in those real values in the function call. So account generator, and let's pass in first name, and that would just grab the first name at the very top, and last name, which would be Blevins. So let's do first name, last name. I'm just going to remove some of this previous code to avoid confusion. All right, now let's hit run. Okay, great. Now we passed the test, but how come we didn't see any output in the terminal? Can anyone tell me what line of code I can add here to see output in the terminal? Ben, let me know if there's any that come in.
You got it. A few folks just shared their thoughts.
Okay.
They're saying use the print function.
Yes, perfect. So I'm going to use print and wrap new account within the parentheses. Let's hit run. And here is our account generator output. So we have the first 3 letters of the first name and the first 3 letters of the last name, which is exactly what we expected. Okay, cool. Let's move on to the next one. More and more string slicing. So Python comes with some built-in functions for working with strings. One of the most commonly used of these functions is called len. So len returns the number of characters in a string. So if you're coming from any other programming language, maybe JavaScript, for example, this is going to work exactly like the length function in JavaScript. So here it's just down to len, but it also stands for length. So for example, if we take our favorite fruit, blueberry, the length of our favorite fruit is actually 9. So that's the amount of characters in the string. Now notice that when we return a value for length, it's actually not counting in the way that we do when we reference indices, right? Those start from 0. Here, the count starts from 1. So if we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, there's exactly 9 characters. We don't start count from 0. So another interesting thing about the length function is it also takes into account the spaces in a string. So here, I love blueberries is counting this space in between I and love, and the space between love and blueberries. Now, len comes in handy when we're trying to select characters from the end of a string. What is the index of the last character, y, of favorite fruit from above? So let's take a look. So here we have our blueberry. So in order for us to grab the last index, well, the character of the last index, we can use the len function in this way. So I'm just going to grab this. Now it's going to give me an error, but we'll take a closer look as to why in a second. So we'll grab favorite fruit. Okay, great. So this is actually a very helpful error. It says the string index is out of range because remember, we're not counting from 0 anymore. So typically the last index is just going to be the length minus 1. So that is what we have to specify in our code because right now the length, what it's trying to access is actually this. Favorite fruit sub 9, right? That's the amount of characters we have. Yeah, so there's actually no index of 9 in this string, right? The last one is 8. So if we do favorite fruit sub len favorite fruit minus 1, that should give us the last element. So I'm just going to add a minus 1 here, and this should return our y. So this is actually a very common technique that's used amongst many different programming languages. So the most common way to retrieve the last element is to take the length of the string and subtract 1. So you could also slice the last several characters of a string using len. So this is a syntax that we learned previously with the colon, and that's going to just grab something from the start of the string, so we're taking the length minus 4. So that's going to be 9 minus 4. That's going to give us 5, and that's going to give us all of the remaining characters, E-R-R-Y, from the string. So let's drop this into the code editor. Out and retrieve our last characters. So we have E-R-R-Y from Blueberry. Awesome. Okay, let's move on to our exercise. So Coplet's corporate company also wants to update how they generate temporary passwords for new employees. So we're going to write a function called password generator that takes 2 inputs, first name and last name, and then concatenate the last 3 letters of each and return them as a string. Okay, so let's take a second to break down into chunks what we have to do. So I'm just going to remove this code and start writing our functions. So we're going to use def password generator that takes 2 inputs, first name and last name, and then concatenate the last 3 letters of each. So I'm going to just pause for a second and write down in the chat, how do you think we can achieve this? So something we're going to definitely need to use is we'll need the len function. We'll also need our subscript syntax, and we'll also need to slice our string. So we're going to be using all of those 3 things together in order to get the last 3 letters of each. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing we want to do is we want to grab the last 3 letters of first name. So what we're going to try is we're going to type out first name, and we're going to enter our subscript syntax, and then we want to use the len function, first name. So this is going to give us the length of the first name string, right? And now we want to return the last 3 letters. So we want to actually subtract 3. And now can someone explain to me how this is working? So I'm just going to walk you guys through how this is happening. So if we have the length, so the length of first name is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements. So we have 5 minus 3, that's giving us 2. So it's going from the second element onto the last, right? So it's taking the second element, which is I, and it's going to return I, K, and O, which is exactly what we need. So then we want to do the same thing for last name. So we want to grab the length of the string. We want to subtract 3, and that's going to put us exactly at S and return S-U-K-I. Okay, so now the last thing I'm going to want to do is add a return keyword. So another thing that you can do is you can also store this in a variable and then return that variable, or you can simply just return this entire expression as a function. I'm sorry, expression from the function. So now let's hit run. And now we don't get any output until we test our function. So let's test it out on the provided first name and last name. So we have password generator, and let's pass in first name, last name, and we want to store it in temp password. Now, in order to see this, we're going to need to wrap it in a print statement and output temp password. All right, let's move on to the next one. So I think we're going to try to stop at 150 and then hop into the coding challenges. How's that sound? Awesome. Cool. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so negative indices. So negative indices are actually a way that we can access characters at the end of the string much simpler than we did in the previous exercise. So in the previous exercise, we used len to get a slice. There's a much easier way with negative indices, which actually count backwards from the end of the string. So if you use a string name -1, it's going to grab the last character of the string. String name -2 is going to be the second to last character. So for example, -1 is going to give us Y, -2 is going to give us R, -3 is going to give us R, well, the third R, the second R back from the end, but because we want to grab the elements using, because we want to slice our string, it's actually going to return RRY. So let's think about how this is actually working. So it's starting from the third element in the back, and it's returning R, R, Y. So everything that follows that element. So you see how this is actually a lot simpler and also cleaner code than writing out the len function. Okay, so let's hop into the instructions. So use negative indices to find the second to last character in company motto. Save this to the variable second to last. Okay, so let's see how we can grab the second to last character. So we want a second to last variable, set it equal to company motto, and we want to grab the second to last. So let's hit run. Awesome, that's going to be our second to last element. And we also want to use negative indices to create a slice of the last 4 characters in company motto and save this to the variable final word. Okay, so we want our new variable final word is equal to company motto. Now we're grabbing the last 4 characters. So we want to go back 4 and grab everything after that. So now before I print out both of these variables, just type in the chat what you expect the output to be for each one. Okay, so for those of you who said F would be the output for the first one, you are correct. And for those of you who said life would be the output for the second one, you are also correct. How's it going in the chat over there, Ben? Oh, I can't hear you.
Looks like some folks are staying in. But yeah, it's looking good. Mark's got it, F and then life.
Perfect. Okay, so now let's navigate to our coding challenge. So if you're following along, make sure to finish this lesson. It has a lot of useful and important information that you need on Python strings. So we're just, for the sake of time, going to jump immediately into the coding challenge to show you how those are done. So I'm going to pop in back into the syllabus. Oh, that's our cheat sheet. And I'm going to click on this strings code challenges article. And so this article contains 3 coding challenges that are going to test our knowledge of Python strings. It also is going to test our knowledge of functions and a couple of other prerequisite information that we learned previously in the lessons leading up to this one. So the coding challenges include a vowel counter, an M word count, and date extractor. So I'm just going to give 1 or 2 minutes, let's say 1 for the sake of time, for you guys to pop this open and follow along. Okay, so let's get started. So we want to first write a function called vowel counter that takes a string as an argument and counts the number of vowels A, E, I, O, U in it. Okay, so let's get into our code editor. So let's define our function, vowel counter. It's going to take a string as an argument. So you can call this anything you like. I'm just going to call it an str, short for string, and count the number of vowels in it. Okay, so we want to, if we have any string, let's say hey, right? It's going to return 1 as the number of vowels it includes, which is E. So we want to write code to accomplish this logic. So first thing we want to do is we want to actually iterate through the entire string to check if there is a vowel in it. So let's use a for loop. So for, let's say, character in string, we want to check if the character is in our collection of vowels. So we have a list here that we can use. So if car in vowels, then we want to count the number of vowels. Okay, so we're going to need a counter here. So I'm going to declare a variable count, or you can write counter. And I want to increase my count every time a character that exists in the string exists in the vowels list. So we're going to use count plus equals 1, or you can also do count equals count plus 1. Either one works. Okay, so now once we set up our counter, we want to then return the number of vowels in our string, right? That's accumulated in our count. So I want to use the return keyword and return count. Okay, now let's hit run. Now I can't see anything just yet. It's because I haven't called my function. So let's go ahead and call our function with any string. Let's do Ben. And use a print statement to see our output. Awesome. So because Ben's name only has 1 vowel in it, it returns 1. If we do Codecademy, that should return, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Great. Now let's move on to the next one. Oh, I forgot to check my answer. Okay, we got it. All right, let's move on to the next one. Now we want to write a function called mword count that takes a string as an input and returns a count of the words in the string that start with the uppercase or lowercase letter M. Oh, and actually before I move on, I just want to mention that there's numerous solutions for some of these coding challenges. So don't feel like if you don't have exactly this, but your code still works, that you did it wrong. So as long as your code works, uses best practices, you should be good. And of course, also passes the tests. Okay, so now let's move on to this one. So for example, if my sentence is, my gosh, what a beautiful Monday morning this is, then mword count sub my sentence should return 3, right? Because it's going to count how many uppercase and lowercase m's there are. So the uppercase one is here in my Monday, and the lowercase one is in morning. Okay, so let's jump into our code editor and start. So let's write our function, m word count that takes a string as an input. I'll just do an str and returns a count of the words in the string that start with the uppercase or lowercase letter m. So the strategy we're going to use here is actually very similar to what we did in the previous coding challenge, where we iterated through the entire string, right? We have to go through each character in the string and check if it's uppercase or lowercase m. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to set up my counter because I know I'm going to need one here. So let's go ahead and set up our for loop. So let's do word this time in string. We want to set up an if statement. So if word sub 0. Now I really want to hear what you guys think about this, why I'm using word sub 0, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to explain it in a second. So if word sub 0 is equal to m, or word sub 0 is equal to lowercase m, then I want to increase my count. Now, the reason that we used word sub 0 is because when we grab a single word, all we want to check for is if the first letter is an uppercase or lowercase m. So it doesn't really matter to us if there's an m somewhere in the word. We only want an uppercase or lowercase m if it's the first letter, and that's why we're using the subscript 0. So now we added our conditional statement. If word is capital, if the first letter is m or lowercase m, we want to increase our count, and then we want to return this count from the function. So now let's call our function with our my sentence string, wrap it in a print statement to see the output, and let's hit run. Awesome. It returned 3, which is exactly what we expected. You can also try this with other sentences and with other numbers of uppercase and lowercase m's. So let's check our answer, and we got it. Okay, and now we're just going to move on to our final one. I'm sorry if I'm breezing through this. I just want to make sure that you guys can see how all of the coding challenges are done. So here we have our date extractor. Given a string called date that is in the form of month, day, and year, write a function called date extractor that takes date as an input and returns 3 values, month, day, and year. So we actually didn't get a chance to cover escape characters, but they are in the cheat sheet. So escape characters are used to basically, actually, are we going to use that here? Because if we're not.
You can also use the split function.
I'm sorry?
You can also use the split function.
Yes, that's true. So we are going to use the split. Actually, let me just jump into here because we only have 1 minute left. So let's do def. Oh, yes, I didn't finish reading it. So we write a function that takes date as an input and returns 3 values, month, day, and year. So if our date is 6/16/2006, the function should return multiple values in the form 6, 16, and 2006. And we want to keep them as strings. We don't want to convert them to integers. So our function is going to be date extractor. And we're going to accept date as the input. And now we are going to have to split our string. So I'm going to do date.split, and I want to split it at these slashes. So wherever there is a slash, I want it to split the string. So I want to return the elements that are preceding the slash. So now, because date.split doesn't actually change anything for date, we have to store it in a new variable. So let's say new date syntax, and this is going to return an array. So once it returns an array, we can grab the elements and assign them to month, day, and year. So month is going to be new date syntax sub 0. That's going to be our 6. Then day is going to be new date syntax sub 1. And you can, of course, name this variable anything you like. I recognize that I chose a slightly lengthy one. And this one is going to be year. Okay, so now we have our month, day, and year variables. We can go ahead and return them from our function. So we'll do month, comma, day, comma, year. Awesome. And now let's just run our function. Pass in this string and wrap it in a print statement. Okay, let's hit run. Awesome. Here is our tuple, or multiple values in this form. We have month, day, and year. All right, well, thanks everyone for sticking around.
Hey, Galina, I think there may have been a mistake in in the second one.
Okay.
Can we actually look at that together on yours?
Yeah.
Could you share your screen again and then?
Yeah.
Mark Lamb was asking, why do we use word zero? Yeah, so this one here. I think, this is something for me to clarify too, since I'm not, it's been a while since I've used Python. In your for loop on line 5, when you write for word in string, is that going to separate the string into words and know to space them out? Or will that go through every character?
Ooh, that's a great question. So let's take a look at what's actually happening here. So if we print word, so it's actually going to, Yeah, so it's going to iterate through every single, yeah, it actually looks like it's iterating through every single character rather than word.
But we can use that split function again, right? To split on every space and then iterate through that list, right?
Yes, definitely. I'm also going to.
And then Mark, that would sort of get to your question, which is we're using word zero because we want to get the first letter of every word.
Yes. Yeah. Questions and see if there's anything else I missed. Yeah, so for iteration and looping, yeah, that's something we didn't cover in this section, but loops are actually covered in the previous one. So that was something I also wanted to mention. If we go back to our series, there were some topics that we utilized here that weren't taught in this particular section, but for example, functions, lists, and loops were all taught previously. So if you want to get a refresher on that, just go ahead and navigate back to those lessons. But also some of the things that we used, like escape characters and split, they are all in this lesson. We just didn't get a chance to cover it, but definitely make sure to check it out. All right. I guess we're 4 minutes over time, but thank you guys, everyone, for sticking around. I'm going to see if I can field any other lingering questions. Okay, awesome. So, Ben, how are you feeling?
Feeling good.
Awesome. This was a really great session. Thank you, everyone, for hopping in. we will see you next time. So the next module that's going to be covered in this section is dictionaries. So make sure to tune into that one. And then there's one more after that, and the series is all done. All right, everyone. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.